The rain hammered against my windshield as I drove toward the Steinberg residence, my mind already preparing for what lay ahead. My name is Sarah, and at 48 years old, I've spent nearly 2 decades as a pediatric caregiver, specializing in infants with complex medical needs. I've seen countless cases, witnessed both miracles and tragedies, but nothing quite prepares you for the weight of a hopeless diagnosis. The house appeared through the downpour, a beautiful suburban home with manicured gardens and warm lights glowing from within. Yet something about it felt heavy, as if the walls themselves carried the burden of despair. Maria answered the door before I could knock, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "Thank you for coming, Sarah," she whispered, stepping aside to let me in. We don't know what else to do anymore." David stood in the background, his shoulders slumped, his face bearing the unmistakable marks of sleepless nights and endless worry. They led me upstairs to a pristine nursery, decorated with soft pastels and gentle artwork. Yet it felt more like a hospital room than a child's sanctuary. There, in a specialized medical crib, lay Lily. She was impossibly tiny, her delicate features serene, her body completely motionless. "The doctors say it's irreversible paralysis," David explained, his voice cracking with emotion. "A rare congenital condition. They've done every test imaginable. They told us to prepare ourselves for a life of complete immobility. No movement, no sensation, no hope." My heart ached for them, but I remained professional, absorbing the information, understanding the gravity of the situation. Then, a blur of golden fur bounded into the room, breaking the somber atmosphere. A golden retriever puppy, no more than 6 months old, wagged his tail with unbridled enthusiasm, completely oblivious to the tragedy surrounding him. "That's Max," Maria said, a faint, almost forgotten smile touching her lips for the first time. He's a handful, but he's been our only source of joy lately." Max nudged my hand affectionately, then trotted directly to Lily's crib, sniffing her motionless form with curious intensity. I watched him, a tiny spark of intrigue igniting within me. What could a puppy possibly understand about such profound sorrow? What role could he possibly play in this heartbreaking situation? My first week with Lily established a routine that would become the rhythm of my days. I arrived each morning at 7, greeted Maria and David with professional warmth, and then settled into the quiet, methodical work of caring for an infant with severe paralysis. Every 2 hours, I would gently turn Lily's body to prevent pressure sores, a necessary but heartbreaking task that emphasized her complete inability to move herself. I checked her vital signs obsessively, monitored her feeding tube, ensured her comfort in every possible way. The nursery, despite its soft colors and gentle lighting, felt like a sterile ward. Medical equipment surrounded Lily's crib, monitors with softly beeping displays, oxygen tanks, specialized cushioning designed to protect her fragile body. Each piece of equipment was a reminder of her condition, a physical manifestation of the doctor's grim prognosis. I talked to Lily constantly, whispering stories, singing lullabies, describing the world outside her window. I knew she couldn't hear me, couldn't respond, but I did it anyway. Perhaps it was for my own sanity, a way to maintain my humanity in the face of such profound helplessness. Or perhaps, on some level I couldn't articulate, I believed that connection mattered, that my voice might somehow reach her. Max was an ever-present shadow throughout these routines. He would lie on the soft rug beside Lily's crib, his head resting on his paws, his intelligent brown eyes fixed on her with an intensity that seemed almost purposeful. Sometimes he would let out a soft whine, a sound of pure canine empathy that tugged at something deep within my chest. I'd been a caregiver for over 20 years, and I'd learned to maintain professional distance to protect my heart from the inevitable pain. But Max's devotion was different. It was unconditional, unguarded, and utterly genuine. He didn't care that Lily couldn't play with him, couldn't acknowledge his presence. He loved her anyway, with the kind of pure, uncomplicated love that humans often struggle to achieve. Days melted into weeks, and my routine with Lily became second nature. I could perform her care with my eyes closed, my hands moving through the familiar motions while my mind wandered to darker places. The hopelessness was suffocating, a heavy blanket that seemed to grow thicker with each passing day. Maria would often sit by Lily's crib for hours, just watching her daughter, tears silently tracing paths down her cheeks. David tried to maintain normalcy, retreating to his home office, the sounds of his work a distant hum that couldn't quite mask the underlying despair. The house, once filled with the joy of a new baby, had become a tomb of quiet grief. Max, however, remained a constant, vibrant presence in this darkness. His puppy energy was boundless. He'd chase his toys, bark at squirrels outside the window, demand attention with the single-minded focus only a young dog possesses. But when he entered the nursery, something shifted. His usual exuberance would fade, replaced by a focused intensity that seemed almost reverent. He'd spend hours by Lily's crib, his gaze unwavering, his body still in a way that seemed unnatural for such a young animal. I began noticing a peculiar pattern in his behavior. Max would repeatedly nudge Lily's left leg with his nose, a gentle but persistent action that he performed dozens of times each day. Not her arm, not her head, always that specific leg, always the left calf. I initially dismissed it as puppy curiosity, perhaps a game he was trying to initiate with an unresponsive playmate. He was just a dog, after all, a playful golden retriever with the attention span of a 6-month-old. What could he possibly know about Lily's condition? I gently redirect him, telling him, "Max, leave Lily alone, sweetie. She needs her rest." But he was persistent, almost obsessive. He'd move away for a moment, then return, his nose finding that exact spot on her left calf with uncanny precision. It was odd, certainly, but in the face of Lily's profound paralysis, it seemed insignificant, just a puppy being a puppy, nothing more. Max's behavior intensified over the following weeks, becoming less a casual habit and more a deliberate, focused ritual. Every time he entered the nursery, after a quick greeting to me, he would trot directly to Lily's crib and begin his gentle nudging of her left leg. It was no longer just curiosity. It felt like a mission, a purpose that drove him with almost supernatural determination. I found myself watching him more closely, my initial dismissal gradually transforming into genuine intrigue. What was it about that specific leg? Was there something I was missing, something that my years of medical training and experience had failed to detect? One afternoon, the house was particularly quiet. Maria had gone to a doctor's appointment, David was at work, and Lily was resting peacefully. I sat in the rocking chair beside the crib, reading a medical journal, occasionally glancing up at Max. He was at his usual spot, his nose pressed gently against Lily's left calf, a soft whine escaping his throat. I watched him with renewed attention, my eyes narrowing as I tried to understand his motivation. And then it happened, or at least I thought it did. As Max nudged her leg with his characteristic gentle pressure, I saw it. A minuscule, almost imperceptible twitch in Lily's left calf muscle. It was so faint, so fleeting, that I immediately questioned my own perception. Was it just a trick of the light? A random spasm, the kind that sometimes occurs in paralyzed limbs? My imagination, fueled by the desperate hope that always lingers in these situations, even when logic dictates otherwise? I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. Max continued his gentle pressure, his nose working methodically against her skin, but the movement didn't repeat. The doubt crept in like a cold wave, washing over my initial excitement. Could I have imagined it? Could a puppy truly be sensing something that trained medical professionals, with all their advanced equipment and years of experience, had somehow missed? The thought was absurd, almost laughable, yet it gnawed at me, persistent and undeniable, refusing to be dismissed. The image of that tiny twitch haunted me through the night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over in my mind. Was it real? Had I truly witnessed movement in a body that the doctors had declared completely paralyzed? Or was I losing my grip on reality, allowing hope to cloud my judgment? The next morning, I arrived at the Steinberg house with a new sense of purpose. I positioned myself closer to Lily's crib, my eyes glued to her left leg, my entire body tense with anticipation. Max, oblivious to my internal turmoil, resumed his routine with the dedication of a monk performing a sacred ritual. He'd nudge, sniff, and sometimes lick the spot with his warm tongue. I watched, holding my breath, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Nothing. Then, after what felt like an eternity, as Max pressed his nose firmly against her calf, with slightly more pressure than usual, there it was again. A definite, unmistakable muscle twitch. It was still incredibly subtle, barely a ripple beneath her delicate skin, but it was there. And it wasn't a random spasm. It happened precisely when Max applied pressure, as if his touch was triggering a response. My breath hitched. Disbelief warred with a surge of adrenaline that made my hands tremble. Could it be? Could this puppy, this innocent, untrained animal, be detecting something that the most advanced medical tests had failed to reveal? My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation, but there was none. The doctors had been so certain, so absolute in their diagnosis of complete paralysis, yet I had just witnessed movement. A tiny, miraculous movement. My hands shook as I reached for my phone, my mind already formulating a plan. This wasn't just a trick of the light. This was real. This was significant. This could change everything. My hands trembled as I fumbled with my phone, trying to position it to capture the next instance of Max's behavior. It took several attempts, several minutes of Max's patient nudging and my anxious waiting, but finally, I captured it. A short video clip, undeniable proof. Lily's left calf muscle twitching in response to Max's touch. It was faint, but visible. It was real. My heart hammered against my ribs with such force that I thought it might break through. I knew I had to tell Maria and David immediately. But how do you explain something so unbelievable? How do you tell desperate parents that their paralyzed daughter might not be as paralyzed as everyone believed, based on the observations of a golden retriever puppy? It sounded insane. It sounded like the desperate grasping of a caregiver who had become too emotionally invested. Yet, I had the video. I had evidence. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and dialed Maria's number. "Maria," I began, trying to keep my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I need you and David to come home. Something incredible just happened." Her voice was immediately laced with concern. "Is Lily all right, Sarah? What's wrong? Is she in pain?" "She's fine. She's more than fine. Just, please come home. And bring David. I need you both to see this." Within 20 minutes, their car screeched into the driveway. They burst through the door, their faces a mixture of fear and confusion. I led them to the nursery, Max wagging his tail excitedly, sensing the shift in atmosphere, the sudden intensity of emotion. "Watch this," I said, showing them the video on my phone. Maria gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. David stared, his eyes wide with disbelief. Then a flicker of desperate hope began to kindle in his expression. It's real," Maria whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's really moving. Our baby is moving." Maria and David watched the video clip repeatedly, their faces a kaleidoscope of emotions. Shock, disbelief, and then a fragile, almost terrifying hope that seemed to grow with each viewing. Can she do it again?" David asked, his voice barely a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the moment. I nodded, my own heart pounding with anticipation. "Max seems to know how. He's been doing this for weeks." We positioned ourselves around the crib. Max, sensing the gravity of the moment, gently nudged Lily's leg with his characteristic precision. We waited, barely breathing, and then a tiny, undeniable twitch. Maria sobbed, burying her face in David's shoulder. David, usually so stoic, had tears streaming down his face. It was a moment of raw, overwhelming emotion. a tiny spark of light in the suffocating darkness they had lived in for months. "We have to call Dr. Evans," Maria said, her voice choked with tears. "Immediately, she needs to see this." Dr. Evans was Lily's neurologist, a brilliant but pragmatic woman who had delivered the devastating prognosis with clinical precision. I knew she would be skeptical. How could she not be? A puppy detecting nerve function that advanced medical diagnostics had somehow missed. It sounded like something out of a fairy tale, a desperate fantasy born from hope and desperation. But we had the video, and now we had the live demonstration. The tension in the room was almost unbearable. What if Dr. Evans dismissed it as a reflex? What if she thought we were grasping at straws, desperate parents, and an overzealous caregiver clinging to false hope? The hope was intoxicating, but the fear of it being crushed was even more potent. We held our breath, waiting for the medical world to either confirm our miracle or shatter it completely. The next morning, we were at the hospital, a whirlwind of nervous energy and desperate anticipation. Dr. Evans, true to form, listened patiently, but her expression remained guarded, professional, skeptical. "Sarah, Maria, David," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I understand your hope, I truly do. But a spontaneous twitch, even if observed, doesn't necessarily change the diagnosis of complete paralysis. We've done extensive testing, MRI, CT scans, neurological assessments. The results were definitive. But what if it's not spontaneous?" I interjected, my voice surprisingly steady despite the nervousness coursing through me. "What if Max is detecting something? What if he's triggering a response that our equipment missed?" I explained Max's consistent behavior, the specific leg, the precise response, the weeks of observation. Dr. Evans raised an eyebrow, a hint of curiosity replacing her skepticism. "A dog, you say?" she mused, her clinical demeanor softening slightly. "Well, this is certainly unconventional, but I suppose we can accommodate a furry assistant given the circumstances. It's highly irregular. But I'm intrigued. With special permission from hospital administration, Max was brought into the examination room. He seemed to understand the importance of his role, his usual puppy exuberance replaced by a focused determination that was almost eerie. Lily lay on the examination table, surrounded by medical equipment, monitors, and the watchful eyes of Dr. Evans and her team. The doctors watched, their faces a mixture of professional curiosity and thinly veiled doubt. Max, without prompting, without any direction from us, trotted to Lily's side, his nose unerringly finding her left calf. He nudged with the same gentle pressure he'd been using for weeks. We all held our breath. And then, a clear, unmistakable twitch. It happened again. And again. The doctors exchanged glances, their skepticism slowly giving way to astonishment. Dr. Evans leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she studied the monitors. The examination room buzzed with a new kind of energy, a palpable shift from skepticism to genuine scientific interest. The doctors, initially dismissive, were now intensely focused, their instruments and expertise directed by Max's uncanny intuition. Dr. Evans, her brow furrowed in concentration, began a series of targeted tests on Lily's left leg, specifically the area Max had been nudging with such precision. She used a small reflex hammer, then a nerve stimulator, her eyes fixed on the monitors, watching for any response. The results were astonishing, almost miraculous. "There's a response," she announced, her voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and excitement. "A clear, albeit weak, nerve impulse in the perineal nerve pathway. This is extraordinary." She explained that Lily's original diagnosis, while largely accurate for her overall condition, had missed a crucial detail. A rare congenital anomaly had caused a severe compression of the perineal nerve in her left leg, effectively severing the connection to the brain for that limb. However, the nerve itself wasn't completely dead. A tiny, almost imperceptible segment was still viable, capable of transmitting a signal if stimulated precisely. Max, with his heightened senses and intuitive understanding, had somehow detected this minute area of residual nerve function, the only part of Lily's body that could still respond to external stimulation. It was a medical revelation, a missed diagnosis that had condemned Lily to a life of complete paralysis. But now, there was hope. A surgical procedure could decompress the nerve, potentially restoring function to her leg. The room erupted in a mixture of gasps and relieved tears. Max, sensing the shift in emotion, let out a happy bark that seemed to echo the joy filling the room. The decision was made swiftly, with a sense of purpose and hope that had been absent for months. Lily would undergo surgery to decompress the perineal nerve, a delicate and complex procedure that carried its own risks, but offered the possibility of restored function. Maria and David, their faces pale but resolute, gave their consent without hesitation. I stood by them, offering what comfort I could, while Max, sensing the gravity of the moment, lay quietly at our feet, his presence a quiet comfort. The day of the surgery was agonizing. We waited in the sterile hospital waiting room, the clock ticking by with excruciating slowness. Every minute felt like an hour. Maria clutched David's hand, her knuckles white with tension. I tried to distract them with stories of Max's antics, his puppy mishaps, his unwavering devotion to Lily, but our thoughts were all with the tiny infant, vulnerable on the operating table. Max, surprisingly calm despite the tension, rested his head on my lap, his presence a quiet comfort. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dr. Evans emerged from the surgical suite, her face tired but smiling. "The surgery was a success," she announced, her voice filled with relief and professional satisfaction. "The compression was severe, but we were able to decompress the nerve completely. It will be a long road to recovery, and we can't guarantee full restoration of function, but the pathway is open. The nerve has the opportunity to heal." A collective gasp of relief filled the room, followed by tears of joy. It was a miracle, a second chance, a gift that had seemed impossible just weeks before. The first signs of improvement were subtle, almost imperceptible, but they were there. A week after surgery, during a physical therapy session, Lily's left foot twitched, a deliberate albeit weak movement. It was the most beautiful sight I had ever witnessed. The physical therapist, a kind woman named Jennifer, gasped. "Did you see that?" she asked, her eyes wide with wonder. That was a voluntary movement. That was Lily responding to stimulation. The weeks that followed were a testament to Lily's incredible resilience and the power of dedicated care combined with hope. Her recovery was nothing short of remarkable. What began as a faint twitch in her left foot soon progressed to more deliberate movements. First, she could wiggle her toes, then flex her ankle. Physical therapy became a daily ritual, filled with small victories and immense joy. Maria and David were transformed, their grief replaced by an infectious hope that seemed to radiate from their very beings. They spent hours with Lily, encouraging her, celebrating every tiny movement, no matter how small. Max was always there, a furry cheerleader, often lying at the foot of her crib, his tail thumping softly whenever Lily made an effort. Soon, Lily began to move her entire left leg, kicking playfully. Then miraculously, her right leg, which had also shown some weakness, began to respond. The doctors were astounded. They theorized that the successful decompression of the perineal nerve had somehow stimulated other dormant pathways. Or perhaps the sheer will to move, once a possibility, had ignited a cascade of neurological recovery. I watched it all unfold, my heart swelling with pride and wonder. My role as a caregiver had always been about providing comfort and support, but this was different. I had witnessed a true miracle, guided by the intuition of a golden retriever puppy. It changed my perspective on everything. The bond between Max and Lily grew stronger with each passing day. He was her constant companion, her furry protector, and, in a way, her first physical therapist. 6 months later, the nursery was no longer a sterile ward, but a vibrant, joyful space filled with the sounds of a thriving child. Lily, now a thriving toddler, was crawling, pulling herself up on furniture and even taking tentative steps with the aid of a walker. Her laughter filled the house, a sound that once seemed impossible, a gift that had seemed beyond reach. She was reaching developmental milestones that doctors had declared unattainable, surpassing expectations with each passing week. Max, no longer a puppy but a magnificent golden retriever in his prime, was always by her side, his tail wagging furiously whenever she giggled or achieved a new milestone. Their bond was extraordinary, a silent understanding forged in the crucible of despair and hope. My life, too, had changed forever. I left my traditional caregiving role and now work as a consultant, advocating for animal-assisted medical observation, sharing Lily's story with medical professionals and families facing similar situations. The Steinberg family's gratitude was boundless. They often told me I was a miracle worker, but I always corrected them. It wasn't me, I'd say. It was Max and Lily's incredible spirit. I was just paying attention. This experience taught me that intuition, especially animal intuition, can sometimes see what science misses. It taught me that hope is a powerful force, even when all seems lost. And it taught me that the most profound changes often come from the most unexpected places, from a tiny twitch, a persistent puppy, and the unwavering belief that miracles, in their own quiet way, do happen. Lily's story is a testament to the extraordinary connections that exist between all living beings, a reminder that sometimes the greatest healers have 4 paws and a wagging tail.